Good morning. My name is Kevin Crouse. I'm also known as Rev Kev. My pronouns are he, him. Last year, I came across to the UCA from the GGF. Now, in church circles and in institutions, we use a lot of acrostics, and no one knows what we're talking about sometimes. But I came across to the Uniting Church of Australia from the Grace Gospel Fellowship. And the Grace Gospel Fellowship is a denomination in the U.S. That has had a big impact on me. And part of it has been a good impact, and part of it's been a negative impact. But I'm privileged to be teammates with Pastor Pearl. We playfully call each other Pastor Pearl and Rev Kev. And that's to be a bit informal and be real, but also acknowledge who we are. We're planting a church called New City Maitland. And it's been an exciting process. It's been a daunting process. But before that, long before that, my initial connection with the Uniting Church, I was raised in a fundamentalist, evangelical, conservative church and denomination. And it saved my life, because I was in a family situation that was difficult, though I had an amazing mom. But I'm not going to talk about Mother's Day today, because I'd like to talk about what's happening for us and why we're doing what we're doing. But being raised in this conservative denomination, we had a real priority on Paul, the Apostle Paul. And that can be a bit contentious, right? Seems to be this battle between Paul and Jesus. And I was very focused on anything that Paul wrote. Oh, that's got to be true for me. And missed out on a lot of the things that Jesus said. But as I grew up in this church and then got trained at Grace Bible College, which is now Grace Christian University in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I sat in church and I looked around, and there weren't new people coming in. People weren't checking out the church. We weren't bringing new people in. And I was concerned about that. What is this thing that I'm training to do, to be a minister? And what kind of impact are we having in our world? Late one night in a dorm room, probably ending up about 1 a.m., a few of us were talking about what could we do in today's culture that could make Christianity, Christianity's already relevant, but what could we do to bridge the gap between what we know within church community and what people outside of that don't know and don't experience. And in the discussion, we came up with this idea of starting a cafe. Maybe a cafe would be a normal place in the community where we could build a place that is safe and that is normal, because this kind of isn't normal. Even after I've been trained in ministry, this is not really normal. And for about 10 years, dreamed about that. Lisa and I, this is my wife, Lisa, she and I came out to Australia as missionaries. We'd already spent a couple of years being missionaries in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And then I finished my education, got ordained as a minister. But that was an amazing experience in Congo, and then it was even a more amazing experience to come to Australia, a beautiful country, and to be able to be missionaries here was amazing. But at conferences, I'd be introduced, here's Kevin, the American missionary, here to save the pagans of Australia. So I got piss takes from the very beginning of living here in Australia. But after about 5 years of being missionaries here, it came time to start Mars Hill Cafe. That was a ministry that Lisa and I started with a group of friends in Parramatta. And that came out of this passage that we've heard read this morning. I was really inspired by a church that was in Seattle that the guy that started it, I'm no longer encouraged or inspired by, Mark Driscoll, but Mars Hill Church was a church that was meeting skaters and punks in the Seattle scene, and was doing some really innovative things. He's gone a little bit off the rails, but I won't get into that. But it's really interesting to me that Paul, who says a lot of things and seems to be quite constrained in the things that he says, his practice in being in the world, I think, was quite progressive, quite engaging of culture. And I find it interesting, prior to where we started in the reading, we find out what Paul's practice was. As Paul waited for them in Athens, his spirit was revolted at the sight of the city given over to idols. So he debated in the Jewish synagogue with both the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks who worshiped there. And every day he spoke in the marketplace. So in the passage where it talks about the Areopagus, this was the marketplace. This is the place where the philosophers would get together and have discussions and debates and entertain new ideas. But this was his practice. And because he was there on a daily basis, in verse 19 we read that they invited Paul to accompany them to the council of the Areopagus. Because he was there all the time, he was given an invitation to talk to them, to challenge the ideas that they had. And so he wasn't just in the marketplace, he was also in the church. He was in the synagogue. So both places are good places for us to be. We need both, and the world needs us out there in those places. So he had this regular practice. He was speaking in the marketplace. Several writers outside of the Bible discuss the Areopagus in Athens. For example, Lucian of Samosata places a debate amongst the philosophers there. And Aeschylus had a play, Eumenides, that portrays the Areopagus as the judicial body. These examples show how the Areopagus was a key place for public philosophical discussion. And very early on in what Paul does there, he observes that there's this idol. And on this idol it says, "To an unknown God." And he encourages the people of Athens and says, I see that you are spiritual. You don't want to leave anything out. You're open to ideas. And in his address to the Athenians, Paul quotes a couple of their poets, which I'm really interested by that. He quotes the secular pagan poets of the day to tell the people about God. Early on, as I came into the Uniting Church of Australia, I was really interested in learning and getting a feel for this denomination that I felt like I finally found a place that I could fit with my evolving, progressing theology and ideas. And I found this book, An Informed Faith, which is written by William Emerson, edited by him. And one of the papers that are in here, one of the chapters, is written by Jeff Thompson, a brilliant thinker within the Uniting Church. But he quotes the 11th paragraph of the basis of union. I had never come across the basis of union until I came into the Uniting Church. And as I've read it and studied it, there is such a grounding in how we can be in our world and be in a way that reaches people. So in that paragraph it says, in particular, the Uniting Church enters into the inheritance of literary, historical, and scientific inquiry, which has characterized recent centuries, and gives thanks for the knowledge of God's ways with humanity, which are open to an informed faith. The United Church lives within a worldwide fellowship of churches in which it will learn to sharpen its understanding of the will and purpose of God by contact with contemporary thought. I'm really inspired by the idea of looking at science and psychology and all of human knowledge. And just like Paul quoting these poets, it's quite interesting. One of the poets said, "The one in whom we live and move and have our being." What a great description of God as we know God. And the other quote is, "We too are God's children." Now, the poet that Paul quotes was actually talking about Zeus. That's intriguing. So utilizing what's going on in the culture to be able to talk about faith, to talk about the journey that we're on. This last Wednesday, I was at the Family Hotel. And every month at the Family Hotel, there's a night called Culture Club Poets. When I started with the Uniting Church, my second night on the job, July 2nd last year, I happened into the Family Hotel. I'd read an article about it. Pearl had told me that it's an inclusive and safe space, and I thought, I need to check this place out. I do like my dark beer. I'd like to have an occasional whiskey, or maybe more than occasional whiskey. And I showed up at the Family Hotel not knowing what I was going to find. I'm naturally an introvert. You may not know that from me being up front, but I'm that duck with the feet paddling underneath the surface. So I go in, my introverted self, and I see people milling around. And then I hear that there's a bit of a commotion in the side room. And what the commotion was an open mic poetry night was happening. And it felt like I had come home. Because for 10 years, Lisa and I ran a cafe that had an open mic poetry night. And so it was comfortable for me to go and get a beer and go into this little room that was crammed full of poets and to be part of the audience. I was just there this last Wednesday, and to be honest, it felt like church for me because people were creating their art, expressing their hearts. And it was inspiring. And also, one of the poets, and I was almost going to open this way, one of the poets gave a poem that was critical. I knew that it was about church and church people and how Christianity can be represented in the community. And the key line in it was, I am not the truth. Or no, I am the truth. It was positing Christian leaders thinking that they're the truth. And I've started, these last 2 months, I've gotten up to read poetry. I don't write poetry yet. I now want to write some poetry. But they invite people to read others' poetry. And so I got up and I started with, I really liked Nathan's poem. I'll say, I am not the truth. And I'm not sure that I have the truth. I'm trying to find my way. And then I read a couple friends' poems. And it's exciting for me to be in the marketplace. That's what Pearl and I are doing in planting a church. So we actually meet at the Family Hotel now once a month in a thing called Third Sunday. And Third Sunday is at night. And it is our church gathering. And we gather in the Cage stage, which is that little side room, which is a reference to the Blues Brothers, if you don't remember the movie. And the cage was there to keep them from getting hit by the beer bottles. But this the last Third Sunday that we had, which is the third one that we've ever had, our numbers of the number of us that were attending had cut in half. And I was discouraged. Oh, what's going on here? And I'd already been just a little bit tired and all of that, so it played on my emotions. And it's always good to get a little bit of perspective and to see the whole picture. After our gathering, the gathering went fine. We had good engagement. We had the different elements of a liturgy from church in this little room, in the pub. A little interesting side note, the Methodist church that we plan to meet in eventually actually started in the billiards room of the Albion Inn in Maitland. So we're trying to repeat history, give a nod to that. But I think this is also a very contemporary thing as well, meeting people in culture where they are. But after we had our gathering, we usually buy a meal because we want to support the owners of the Family Hotel and this safe space being there. A friend of mine that's part of our congregation, you could call it, we're standing at the bar and there's a guy between us. We're all ordering our drinks. And a just natural conversation starts up, not with an agenda from us. We're not trying to share our faith or anything. We're just trying to be human. And this gentleman starts talking about his life because we're friendly. And we actually engaged him in conversation. And he goes, were you guys having church in there? I know that people in the pub were talking, probably staff, were telling him what it was. And he asked, who can go to that? What do you think my answer was? Anyone. And in the conversation, and as he's sharing about his life, he also said, oh, but I'm Buddhist. I said, that's fine. You can come along. You're welcome. Not expected, but always welcome. We continued to have conversation. He unpacked his life. We went to eat our meal. And then by the time we finished our meal, we were getting up to go. And he came from the other side of the pub to us and hugged every single one of us. What a great night. I didn't need to be discouraged, did I? So 10 months ago, when I happened upon the family hotel, sat through the first part of the poetry night, was encouraged. My mind was just ticking over. My heart was full. The second half after intermission, the headline poet got up, and I went and sat at the bar, looking at the poet through the window of the cage stage. I ordered myself a gospel whiskey. It was actually a brand, Gospel Whiskey Company. I sat there at the bar, and I watched Paul R. Cohn from Adelaide do his set. And he finished with this poem, and I'd like to leave you with this. It's entitled, May Your Future. May your future shine like the sun, giving warmth and light. May your dreams motivate you to fight for what's right. May your current state be full of strength and might. As you travel on your journey, fight your good fight. May the way you have shattered be turned into good. May it help to guide others as you heal, burn dead wood. Learning self-worth, self-love, reclaiming livelihood, sharing with others so they know that they too could. May your heart have the peace that its pieces desire. Resonate bright, a leading light, full of heartwarming fire. A hate-free zone, full of love that no other soul can mire. Impacting humanity positively, always seeking to inspire. No matter how far you go, may your heart find a home. May your tribe hold your hand. May they never let go, believing in you always, no matter how far you roam. As you share courage and love with others, together or alone. May your legacy leave the planet a lasting impression when the time comes to walk the stairway to heaven. May your words still ring true and help long after you're gone. When it is all said and done, may your history live long. But until then, may your future shine like the sun, giving warmth and light. May your dreams motivate you to fight for what's right. May your current state be full of strength and might as you travel on your journey. Fight your good fight.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Honestly, I don't know about you. I really enjoyed listening to Kevin and following through. And I wonder whether you actually have anything that you'd like to ask Kevin?
I'm just curious, what made you change to the Uniting Church? I mean, it's a big change coming from a sort of evangelical background to this. This is like you've gone from 0 to 100, like it's polar opposites. So I'm just curious.
It is kind of polar opposite.
Yeah, what's going on?
And early in my process, when I had to turn in a form that was a clergy in good standing, I needed to go back to my denomination to let them know that I was making this move, and there was plenty of room for fear for me that they were going to then kick me out, which I'm intrigued because I actually gave them a full disclosure back in June in between selling my coffee company and moving into the Uniting Church because I worked in coffee for the last 13 years after the cafe. And so what has changed for me is this rule-oriented, the Grace Gospel Fellowship. We didn't tend to be very gracious quite often. We definitely were not inclusive. my journey with Mars Hill Cafe, we got in touch with the real world and had our beliefs, our dogma challenged by real people. And we became part of a community that was made up of everyone that came along. And that made me have to rethink some things. So that's kind of that journey. And some things just not matching up, and us not leaning in with the principle of love and the principle of grace, which I think is core throughout, from the beginning of Scripture till the end.
I have a question for you, Kevin. I'd love you to tell us, and I just adore the shirts you wear.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think they actually, you walk into a room and people actually go, okay, what's this guy doing? You know, what's he on about? So tell us your kind of idea behind the shirts.
So when I re-met Rod Paddington for the first time, it was at church, and I was wearing a Reg Mombasa shirt.
He grew up with him.
Yep, and he went to school with him, art school, but a very loud shirt, like the whole Mambo loud shirt thing. And I had gotten obsessed with Dog Trumpet, the band, which is Reg's band, and his art. I've got a print of his art in my office, and I really love his playful interaction with the church and critique of how we are as Christians and faith and all of that. But they keep talking about God all the time and the church all the time in concerts. It's interesting. I've had an advertisement come up for Trade Mutt shirts, which is a tradie who lost his best friend to suicide. And so he created these loud shirts that 50% of the proceeds go to free mental health care for blue-collar workers. And Maitland's kind of a blue-collar place. I'm an introvert. I also have got some blue-collar skills. I can work on a car. I can fix things. I had a grandfather who invested in me to know how to work with my hands. I fix things. Underneath the flap here is a QR code that you can scan, and it takes you to the counseling. There's a statement on the back that says, "This is a conversation starter." Stylistically, I would like to have shirts that don't have that on the back, because it already starts conversations, these loud shirts. And because I'm naturally an introvert, like, I'll be worn out after this, and especially after morning tea, I'll be worn out because I don't charge my batteries this way. But I've learned that a conversation is one of the most important things. Dialogue and sharing our lives, not with an agenda to try to share faith, just being human. And when people notice the shirt, I can say, I myself have had suicidal ideations. And it's because of that conservative church that had all these rules, but had a group of men in it who stood in the place of my father, who was around and around too much, but wasn't really a good dad, was an angry dad. And they were there and gave me hope. So I made it through. And I want to do that for others as well.